Tom, a young man in his late 20s, had always been a bit of a night owl. He enjoyed the solitude that the night offered, the quiet moments where he could think and reflect, but tonight was different. There was an unease that settled in his chest, a feeling that something was terribly wrong. He couldn't shake the sensation that he was being watched, that unseen eyes were following his every move. Tom was running late again. His shift at the late-night diner had dragged on longer than usual, and he had lost track of time. The streets were empty, devoid of the usual late-night wanderers and the occasional car. The only sound was the echo of his footsteps, a rhythmic beat that seemed to grow louder with each step. He quickened his pace, his breath visible in the cold air, forming small clouds that dissipated almost instantly. The late-night diner's shift dragged on, and by the time he hit the empty streets, the town was cloaked in an unsettling quiet. The streetlights cast long shadows, creating pockets of darkness that seemed to move and shift as he walked. The buildings, usually so familiar, now looked like looming giants, their windows dark and empty, like hollow eyes staring down at him. The silence was deafening, broken only by the occasional rustle of leaves or the distant bark of a dog. He reached the bus stop, the flickering street light above casting ghostly shadows. The bus stop was a small, unassuming structure with a single bench and a timetable that had seen better days. The light above flickered intermittently, casting eerie shadows that seemed to dance and twist in the darkness. Tom glanced at his watch, noting the time. The bus was due any minute now, but the unease in his chest only grew stronger. The bus was due at 11:50. It was 11:45. Minutes ticked by. Unease crept in. The seconds seemed to stretch into eternity, each tick of the clock echoing in the stillness. Tom shifted nervously on the bench, his eyes darting around, searching for any sign of movement. The street remained empty, the silence growing more oppressive with each passing moment. He checked his watch again, the hands moving agonizingly slow. No headlights. No bus. The road stretched out before him, a dark ribbon cutting through the night. There was no sign of the bus, no distant headlights piercing the darkness. The only light came from the flickering street lamp, casting its ghostly glow on the empty street. Tom's heart began to race, a sense of dread settling in the pit of his stomach. He couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. Just the oppressive silence of a sleeping town. The town, usually so full of life, now felt like a ghost town. The buildings stood silent and dark, their windows like empty eyes staring out into the night. The silence was almost tangible, pressing down on him, making it hard to breathe. Tom glanced around, hoping to see some sign of life, but there was nothing. Just the empty streets and the oppressive silence. At 11:59, Tom saw a shadow, human-like but distant. It was just a fleeting glimpse, a shadowy figure at the edge of his vision. He squinted, trying to make out the details, but the figure remained elusive, shrouded in darkness. It stood still for a moment, then moved, disappearing into the shadows. Tom's heart pounded in his chest, a cold sweat breaking out on his forehead. He took a step forward, then stopped, unsure of what to do. It vanished into the darkness. The figure was gone as quickly as it had appeared, swallowed by the night. Tom stood there, staring into the darkness, his mind racing. Had he really seen something, or was his mind playing tricks on him? He shook his head, trying to clear his thoughts. The bus would be here any minute now. He just needed to wait a little longer. Suddenly headlights pierced the stillness. The sudden light was almost blinding, cutting through the darkness like a knife. Tom squinted, raising a hand to shield his eyes. The bus was finally here. Relief washed over him, but it was quickly replaced by a sense of unease. There was something off about the bus, something he couldn't quite put his finger on. An old, unmarked bus rolled up. The bus was old, its paint chipped and faded. There were no markings, no indication of its route or destination. It came to a stop in front of him, the doors creaking open with a groan. Tom hesitated, a sense of dread settling in his stomach. This wasn't the usual bus, but it was late, and he needed to get home. No driver in sight. The driver's seat was empty, the interior of the bus dark and foreboding. Tom took a step back, his instincts screaming at him to run, but then a voice, gravelly and cold, echoed from within the bus. "Are you getting on or not?" a gravelly voice asked from within. The voice sent chills down his spine, but he couldn't see where it was coming from. It seemed to echo from the very walls of the bus surrounding him. He took a deep breath, trying to steady his nerves. He had no other choice. He had to get home. Tom hesitated, but boarded. He stepped onto the bus, the doors closing behind him with a finality that made his heart race. The interior was dimly lit, the seats worn and cracked. The air was thick with the smell of old leather and something else, something he couldn't quite place. The bus interior was dark, seats worn and cracked. The dim light cast eerie shadows, making the interior seem even more foreboding. Tom took a seat near the front, his eyes darting around, searching for any sign of the driver. But there was no one. The bus was empty, save for him. An eerie silence enveloped him. 3 a.m. The silence was almost suffocating, pressing down on him from all sides. He glanced at his watch, noting the time. It was just past midnight. He took a deep breath, trying to calm his racing heart, but then the silence was broken by a crackling sound. A voice crackled over the intercom. Next stop, nowhere. The voice was distorted, barely recognizable, and it sent chills down his spine, the words echoing in the stillness. Tom's heart raced, a sense of dread settling in his stomach. He glanced around, but there was no one else on the bus. He was alone. The bus doors slammed shut, lights flickered, and it lurched forward. The sudden movement almost threw him from his seat. The lights flickered, casting eerie shadows that seemed to dance and twist in the darkness. Tom gripped the edge of his seat, his heart pounding in his chest. He had a terrible feeling that he had made a grave mistake. Alone, Tom watched the town's lights fade into darkness. The bus moved through the empty streets, the town's lights growing dimmer and dimmer until they were swallowed by the night. Tom stared out the window, his mind racing. Where was this bus taking him, and why was he the only passenger? By the roadside, the shadowy figure reappeared, staring at him. The bus accelerated. The figure was there, standing by the side of the road, its eyes fixed on him. Tom's heart raced, a cold sweat breaking out on his forehead. The bus picked up speed, the figure disappearing into the darkness. Tom's mind raced, trying to make sense of what was happening. Tom realized, too late, that sometimes the last bus of the night isn't just the end of a route. The realization hit him like a punch to the gut. This wasn't just a bus ride. It was something more, something sinister. He glanced around, but there was no escape. The bus was moving too fast, the doors locked tight. He was trapped. It's the end of everything. The bus hurtled through the darkness, the road stretching out before them like a black ribbon. Tom's heart pounded in his chest, a sense of dread settling in his stomach. He had a terrible feeling that he would never see the light of day again. The last bus of the night had become a one-way ticket to the unknown, and there was no turning back.